If you own a property in Turkey and you are planning to rent it out, there is one thing you should know before signing the lease. A 1-year rental agreement does not necessarily mean that you will get your property back after 1 year. For foreign property owners, this is probably one of the most important things you understand about Turkish rental law. Today, I want to cover what you should pay attention to before renting out your property, how rent increases work, when a tenant can be evicted, and most importantly, what you should do before handing over the keys. Let us start with a very common misunderstanding. You own an apartment in Turkey, you find a tenant and sign a rental agreement for 1 year. Naturally, you think the contract ends after 1 year. And if I do not want to continue, the tenant leaves. But that is generally not how residential leases work under Turkish law. Under Turkish Code of Obligations, if the tenant does not notify the landlord at least 15 days before the end of the contractual period that they intend to leave, the agreement is automatically extended for another year. More importantly, the landlord generally cannot terminate the agreement simply because the 1-year period has expired. When you sign a 1-year rental agreement, you should not think of it as giving your property to this person for only 1 year, because legally, that relationship may continue for much longer. Turkish law also provides significant protection to residential tenants beyond that first year. Generally, the landlord cannot simply say, "I do not want this tenant anymore," or "I want to rent the property to someone else at a higher price." Without a specific legal ground, the landlord may have to wait until statutory 10-year extension period has been completed before obtaining the broader right to terminate without reason. And this is exactly why the rental agreement should never be treated as just another standard document. What you sign today may determine your relationship with that tenant for many years. Of course, this does not mean tenants can never be evicted. Turkish law provides several grounds for termination: non-payment of rent, genuine personal need for the property by the landlord or certain close family members, major reconstruction, specific situations involving a new owner, and written undertakings by the tenant to vacate. But there's a very important point here. Having a reason to evict a tenant and having a legally enforceable right to evict a tenant are two different things. Every eviction mechanism has its own conditions, deadlines, and procedural requirements. A notice sent at the wrong time can cost you months. A document prepared incorrectly may become useless when you actually need it. And sometimes, by the time the landlord contacts a lawyer, the opportunity to put strongest legal protection in place has already passed. Which brings me to what I want every property owner watching this to hear carefully. There are legal mechanisms under Turkish law that can place a landlord in much stronger position if the tenant later refuses to leave. But these mechanisms need to be structured correctly, and they need to be considered before the rental relationship begins. I will not go into technical details in this video because their effectiveness depends heavily on how and when the documents are prepared. But if you are about to rent out your property in Turkey, this is something I strongly recommend addressing before you hand over the keys. Contact us before signing the rental agreement, not after. Now on rent increases. A landlord cannot simply choose an increased percentage every year. For renewed rental periods, Turkish law establishes a ceiling based on the Consumer Price Index, the TÜFE, published by TÜİK. More specifically, the relevant figure is the 12-month average rate of change in TÜFE. This is not necessarily the same as the headline annual inflation number you see in the news. Before applying any annual increase, you should verify the legally applicable figure that specific renewal period. There is also a 5-year threshold worth understanding. Over time, especially during periods of high inflation or rapidly increasing property values, the rent paid by an existing tenant may become significantly lower than comparable market rents. The Turkish law provides a mechanism for the rent to be reconsidered after the relevant 5-year period, where comparable values, the condition of the property, TÜFE, and principle of equity all become relevant. If you are investing in Turkish real estate for rental income, you should understand both annual increase mechanism and the longer-term rent determination rules from the outset. If your tenant stops paying rent, do not simply send informal messages and hope the problem resolves itself. Turkish law provides specific remedies for non-payment, including formal notice procedures and enforcement mechanisms. There is also a separate eviction mechanism where the tenant causes the landlord to issue the two justified notices within the legally relevant period. The important point is this: act early if rent is not being paid. Speak to your lawyer before months arrears accumulate. And one more issue foreign investors frequently overlook. If you buy a property that already has a tenant living in it, buying the property does not automatically cancel the existing rental agreement. As the new owner, you generally step into the existing rental relationship. There are circumstances where a new owner may seek eviction based on genuine personal need, but specific statutory deadlines and procedures apply. So if you are buying a tenanted property, reviewing the title deed is not enough. You should also review the rental agreement, the current rent, payment history, the duration of the tenancy, the security deposit, and any other documents signed between the previous owner and the tenant. The tenant is a part of your legal due diligence before purchasing the property. And finally, the recommendation I give to every foreign property owner: do not sign a rental agreement simply because someone tells you this is a standard contract everyone uses. A rental agreement should be reviewed according to specific property and specific transaction, payment terms, annual increases, security deposit, utilities, permitted use, subletting, inventory notice provisions, and termination conditions should all be considered carefully. A real estate agent can help you find a tenant and complete the transaction, but your rental agreement is a legal relationship, and when something goes wrong 2 or 3 years later, what matters is not what someone told you when you signed. What matters is what the document actually says. So if you own property in Turkey and you are planning to rent it out, remember this: protecting yourself as a landlord starts before the tenant moves in, not when you eventually want the tenant to leave. There are legal mechanisms that can significantly strengthen your position, but they need to be established correctly from the beginning. If you are planning to rent out your property in Turkey, contact us before signing the rental agreement and before handing over the keys. Because in rental law, the document you prepare today determines how easily you recover your property tomorrow.